Earlier this year, I got a call from one of my BFFs. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Golda.
Claire and I have been besties for a long time. Our kids are the same age and are now in college, but we first met when they were in preschool, back when I was living in London. Ours is one of those friendships that has somehow survived distance and time. And with the passing of time, of course, there's one thing that we regularly talk about when we catch up. We're women of a certain age, so no surprise, we talk menopause. We usually commiserate, laugh, swap disaster stories, and move on. But this call was different.
So one of the key things about perimenopause, there's always a joke on Insta or Facebook, who's that friend that, can't find their phone in their bag.
This is from a conversation that I recorded later.
I've always lost things, not been able to misplace them and then find them later. I remember I put my wallet down somewhere, and I thought, what have I done with my wallet? So I looked for it and I went into my bedroom and I couldn't remember the colour of my wallet. So not only did I not know where it was, I didn't know what it looked like. I thought I've got dementia.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, my God, that's what I would have thought. I thought, okay, this is me, Alzheimer's, it's coming.
Yeah, because, you can lose things, can't you? But to forget what they look like. So, lots of things like brain is straining to remember where things are or what people are called. Or that was part of me feeling like I was going mad. I've always thought there's something wrong with me, but those symptoms in perimenopause really heightened that there's got to be something else.
And it turns out there was something else. Claire has ADHD, a diagnosis that came in her early 50s. It was a surprise when she told me, and it took me a minute to process it. But it also explained a bunch of things, which Claire and I talk more about in this episode.
So ADHD, as we may all know or not know, is so underdiagnosed in women, just for so many reasons. I think two main reasons. One of them is the way women cover up. And then tied to that is that ADHD is easily diagnosed or easier in men, boys. So all the information that the medical industry has gathered are all based on the male experience. And it presents differently in men and women. And so one of them is that restlessness, fidgeting, that you often think about when you think about like a 6-year-old with ADHD who's running around like he's on a sugar high. So that's more of a male thing, whereas I've still got that, but mine's up here. That's my brain doing the never stopping, running around like a maniac. So all these things weren't necessarily recognised, that the restlessness or the craziness is not a physical thing, it's actually a mental thing. So this is one of the key reasons it's been undiagnosed, because we're just thinking about symptoms and how it presents in men. It's different.
This is Overlooked, and I'm Golda Arthur. In this episode, you'll hear a conversation between me and my friend Claire Tomkins about ADHD in women and her story about how she was diagnosed and how that diagnosis changed her life. I met Claire in person when I was in London earlier this year, and she agreed to tell her story on the podcast. I started by asking her what went through her mind when she first found out about the ADHD diagnosis.
It was like my initial reaction was sadness, maybe tinged with a bit of shame. Oh God, there's something wrong with me, That's just how I felt about myself. That's a very personal feeling. Oh, there is something wrong with me. And then I did cry. And then once that wore off, I was like, oh, well, that's good. All these things I've been feeling, and I didn't know I don't want to use the word wrong with me, but why I was like I was, there's an explanation for it. And I've then felt relief, and it made me understand myself a little better.
Tell me how it came about.
So I had depression on and off. I definitely had postnatal depression. And that was when it was first diagnosed. And then I had treatment for that and I was fine. And then when I had my second child, the depression was a lot worse, but my depression did go on for a while. It used to come and go. And then when I split up from my husband, it was really bad then. And I actually went through some counselling, a lot of counselling, and that was really helpful. So I had a psychiatric assessment and lots more therapy. And sort of one of the things that came out in the therapy was that, I'm simplifying it, but all my problems were linked to low self-esteem, which is one of the key things with people with ADHD. There's different types of ADHD, how it manifests, and there's a few different reasons, but it often goes hand in hand with clinical depression, low self-esteem. And then, rather bizarrely, this low self-esteem is linked to being bullied at a young age. And I was bullied from when I was 3 to when I was 5, and that played a big part in my life. And I hadn't realised, and I'd brushed it under the carpet for years, and that all came out. And then really it was my therapist that sort of suggested that there was something else. I don't want to use the word wrong with me, something else going on. So she gave me a test to do, an ADHD test. I'm calling it a test, so it's lots of different scenarios.
And what was that like?
So it was, they'd give you a scenario offer. It was in different parts, but one of them was a scenario, if this happens, what's your reaction? How did you feel? And then once you've answered that, it goes through to another layer of the same sort of question. Then there's things about how do you feel about yourself? And as I was going through, I was like, oh, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Oh, wow, that's me. Oh, that's me. I was almost like, you don't need to add it up. My therapist couldn't diagnose me officially because that's not her trade. So she referred me to my GP, who also ran some other tests. I can't remember how it's worded, but basically I've got ADHD. And then you have to be referred to, I think it's a psychiatrist or something. This is how it works in the UK, or works around here. Don't know if it's the same everywhere. The first prescription for medications and treatment plans and things like that. And then after that, you come under like your GP. But I'm still waiting for that to happen, because over here there's a long wait list. But people are really aware of mental health's a big thing now, and everyone's talking about it. So a lot more people are being diagnosed because they're just aware of how they're feeling, and it's a good thing. But there's this sort of other thing that goes with it, where it's fashionable now to have ADHD. You know, everyone seems to be diagnosed, and it's a pain, because with someone with it and that's lived with it, you don't want to live with it. You don't want to, I'm so trendy now. I've got some new Adidas Gazelle trainers and I've got ADHD, so it's not, that bugs me. That bugs me a lot. And it's a good thing that people are diagnosed, because, they're getting the treatment, or even if they decide not to have a treatment plan, you're aware of it. And it's an explanation for things that you've done or things that you felt. It's not a reason or excuse. It is that explanation of who you are. And that's kind of a comfort.
Tell me about how you were told the diagnosis.
Oh, yeah, that was on text message.
You were sent a text message.
I was sent a text message.
What did it say?
Congratulations. No, I think it just said, following your previous test, you have identified as ADHD or something. It's all very much, you've got to push it yourself.
Yeah.
And if you've got ADHD and depression, or just ADHD, the last thing one of your skills is not to push things yourself. You just can't. And It's not a laziness, it's just the way your mind works. So there's a bit of a gap.
So give me an example of what it explained, or what it helped you to understand. Like, is there one thing that you would do regularly, or that you did, that now you look back on it and you think, oh, I get it now. That's why I did what I did. Whereas at the time, it didn't make sense.
So for me, one of the big things, and it's present in many fellow ADHDers, is impulse control.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's things I say I've got no filter, really no filter, naturally. You probably may have picked up on this.
Here and there.
So impulse control in everything, things I do, things I say. And I look back and I cringe. And I mean, there's been lots of incidents. But there was one incident. I was working in Australia. It was a contract role. We were for settlements for ANZ Bank, and they were moving their office, and we were there to help with the debt side of it and move over. And we just finished. It was a graduate thing, but there were lots of, we were in Australia and lots of people that had families or came from all over the world. So you weren't allowed to make calls out, international calls out. And there was only one phone in the whole department that you could, and that was attached to the fax machine. So I decided at that moment, they brought out the beers and stuff. I decided that I'd take my beer into the confidential room where the fax machine was and call my dad. So obviously the guy caught me, came round, and he said, I love you, you're brilliant and you're really good at your job and everything about you is fantastic. And we were going to roll out a second session. If I hadn't caught you doing that, you would have been on it, but I can't. And when he left, he said, you've got this impulse thing, there's something in your, I see it in you. And I just used to think, oh, it's so boring. And why are people so boring? There's lots of things where I've said something that I felt in my mind and then thought that I shouldn't have. And then thought, why are people overreacting, And you look back on it and you think, not only did I think that, but I said it out loud, and it was more embarrassing for myself that I'd say these things and I'd upset people and things like that.
So what is the diagnosis? So it's given you a new level of understanding of why you do what you do, how your mind operates. What has changed since the diagnosis, or what are you doing anything differently?
So because I've been having CBT therapy to deal with the self-esteem and my impulses, so I do think about the situation before. If I know it's going to be a tricky situation, I'll think about it before and think to try and be careful. And when I'm thinking things now, I think, actually, should I be saying that? Or I've interpreted it the wrong way, I've catastrophized it or something like that. So I can do that a bit more. But that's only 80%, because if I'm really upset or angry, then I still have that level of lacking of impulse control. So in ADHD, often people can't, you see younger children running around physically, they can't stop. Mine is mentally, I can't stop. Constant activity is up here, and I can't switch that off. So that's a constant. That is exhausting. That is the worst.
Your mind is racing. Yeah.
Or 24 hours a day. I can't shut it off. I can never shut it off. That's really exhausting, and that does lead me to not be able to relax. I can't relax. I might sit and watch TV, but I can't. I'm not actually relaxing. I can watch a program and not remember what's in it because my brain has also been working.
I mean, it's so interesting because, you're grown up and you've got responsibilities and your mom. And, when we think about it, as you say, in small children, it seems, I mean, of course, when we get our small children diagnosed, it's a big deal. But it does seem slightly lower stakes than being an adult with responsibilities and that kind of thing. So how does this ADHD diagnosis and being ADHD, what is the interplay between that and being a mother, for example?
I have to force myself to be different. I didn't know it was ADHD, but I knew I had things. I knew I was slightly, the way I approached things was different, impulse control and that sort of thing. But I'm very much, these are my children. We all shout at our children when we shouldn't, but I'm really mindful that I don't have impulse reactions with them. Really, really careful. I force myself, which is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I can't force myself with other people. And then other things like procrastination and deliberation. When you've got ADHD, you can't start something. You just can't start it. There's something that happens. And once you start things, so I was really always mindful that I did start the housework. I did start dinner. I wanted them to have, if I was on my own or they were at their dad's, I wouldn't probably cook for myself. I wouldn't wash up. I wouldn't do anything. I just wouldn't force it. But as soon as I knew they were coming back or they were at home, then I'd force myself to look like a normal mum, I guess. Yeah.
So we're at that stage in our lives where we're dealing with perimenopause, menopause, all the wonderful things.
All the wonderful things, yeah.
And what has been the interplay between that giant shift in hormones and entering a new stage in our lives and the ADHD?
I think because I knew that perimenopause was happening to me, then it led to the diagnosis, I guess, because I was delving into my mental health more. For me, it was the brain fog, the mood changes, the quick shift in mood, those sort of things that are there in ADHD. I suppose I looked at them in more detail than I did for the rest of my life to see what treatment I could have or how I can manage those. And then it just sparked up conversations about sort of my mental health generally. So it was just overanalyzing myself because so much was going on, which then led to actually there's a reason, there's an explanation.
So it's kind of interesting that your perimenopause symptoms eventually put you on this path where eventually you got the diagnosis for ADHD.
Yeah. I think it's because I only had, say, one thing wrong with me. When I only had ADHD, that I thought that was just my personality, so I could deal with that. And then when you add on a layer of depression, you treat the depression. And then when you add on perimenopausal symptoms onto that, you just can't, you then become, actually, I can't cope. So then you have to look at it. You have to look at what's going on in your head. So I think when you're younger, you've got more energy, you get on with it, you sort of push it to the background. And then it's just adding on these things where I got to the point where I thought I was going mad. And I still feel like I'm going mad now, but there's an explanation. But I thought I was going mad every day.
Is there one thing you can point to where you remember where you think, yes, that's it, I'm going crazy?
I think the first time that I really felt I was going crazy was the whole wallet. So purse, we call it over here, but it's your wallet. And I was going out and I needed to take my wallet with me. And I couldn't find it. And it wasn't in my handbag, and it wasn't on the side in the kitchen or the usual places or on the dining table. So I went into my bedroom. I thought maybe I've left it in there on my bedside table. So I went in there and it wasn't in there. So I was thinking, where, you go through that, when did I last see it, Then I thought, well, I can't remember what it looks like. It suddenly dawned on me. And that was horrific. I can't remember what my purse, something I look at all the time, all day, every day. So then I thought, okay, try and think what colour it is, at least if you remember what colour it is. I couldn't remember what colour it was, what shape it was. I could not remember. I couldn't remember. And I didn't find it at that time. I found it later. I'm going mad. I was so scared. Maybe I've got Alzheimer's, dementia, ridiculous things like I've got a brain tumour because I get a lot of headaches. So all this catastrophizing, but I was scared, yeah. I thought there's something serious because you can forget where you put your keys, but you can still remember what they look like. Everyone forgets but not to remember what something looks like that you use often. This was before the days where you paid for everything with your phone and that sort of thing. So you needed your wallet, like every time you went into a shop.
Yeah.
So that scared me to death, yeah.
Looking back on things, and I shouldn't say looking back because you're right in the middle of things. Like you're in line to get treatment, right, on the NHS, and that takes a while here. What has been the bright spot in all of this?
I was actually quite happy that I had a diagnosis and there was a reason for things. But now living with it and having no sort of treatment plan at the moment. So I'm very frustrated that although I've had a diagnosis and that's great, I haven't worked out how to get to the next stage.
Mm-hmm. What do you think has been the most overlooked aspect of all of this? And where is that inequality felt most deeply?
I think it's a generalization with women that often we're given a Band-Aid because we have hormones and periods. So a good example is I had actually a heart valve. My aortic valve was broken, and it had been for a while. So what that means is when your heart pumps blood into that area of your heart, it's meant to stay in there, and the valve closes, and then I don't know the ins and outs of why, but actually my blood was going back into my body. So I had really bad anemia, and I'd been to the doctors and they just said, well, it's just because you have heavy periods. They didn't explore it. They never once explored it. And so I was anemic because of that. And then, so there was a similar story with my daughter. She's very young. She's 17 now. She used to have she still does have very bad period pains, and so bad. I thought, I'm just going to take her to the doctor because I will need to find out if there's a reason. And she just said it's because she's young and she has periods and they'll get better. So I said, can we just find out if that's right? I'm happy if that's all it is. I don't want to waste anyone's time, but before we stick a Band-Aid on it, can we just have a look to see if that's all it is? Mm. So we did. It turns out she's got 2 cysts on her ovaries, and that's why she had heavy periods. They weren't life-threatening cysts. It's quite normal, but we know we've got to keep an eye on it. And, but it seems to be you hear this a lot, that women are hormonal. That's why they behave, or that's why they feel like they do.
And we never dig and find the actual reason for anything. Yeah.
No, we don't. And I think maybe because the NHS is under pressure, GPs under pressure, and a lot of time it is just it can be the reason, can't it? These things can be nothing and normal in inverted commas. But it seems to be the tale with most women.
Claire, thank you so much for telling me all of that.
Thank you for letting me tell my story. I wouldn't tell it to anyone else.
Overlooked is written and produced by me, Golda Arthur. Jessica Martinez-Eos is our producer. We're building a community around women's health so that no one is overlooked. If you'd like to be part of it, sign up for the newsletter at overlookedpod.com. And you can get in touch with us by emailing hello@overlookedpod.com. What you hear and read on Overlooked is for general information purposes only and represents the opinions of the host and the guests. The content on the podcast and website should not be taken as medical advice. Every person's body is unique, so please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions that may arise. Thanks for listening.